Okay, so hello and welcome to this installment, the second installment for this term of the Chinese Business History webinar here at the Hong Kong Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Hong Kong. I'm Ghassan Moazin, and I'm one of the co-conveners of the Chinese Business History Research Cluster at the Institute, and also the co-convener of this webinar series. So today we're very honored and very happy to welcome to the webinar series Dr. Li Zigui from Yat-sen University. Dr. Li is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History at Yat-sen University, and she received her PhD from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, where she worked on the history of the North China Herald, the important sort of foreign language newspaper published in China in the 19th and 20th century. She broadly works on Sino-foreign information exchange and the societal transformations associated with it, and has published widely in peer-reviewed journals. And she today, though, is going to talk to us about a new project, I think. Her talk today is entitled "The Counterparty to Chinese Business, the Upper Yangtze Steam Navigation Scheme, and the Opening of Chongqing." So we're looking forward to that very much. As usual, the format is that Dr. Li is going to talk for roughly half an hour, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. If you have any questions for Dr. Li, please submit them through the Q&A button in Zoom, and then I will read them out during the Q&A period. But I don't want to take up any more time, so Zigui, if you're ready to get started, then please feel free to do so.
Thank you for a kind introduction, and I'm super excited to be here today and thank Hong Kong Institute for the Humanity and Social Science for making this happen, and especially thank to Ghassan and Professor John Wang for thinking of me and inviting me to share my recent research. And my name is Dr. Li Zigui. I'm from Zhongshan Daxue, Yat-sen University History Department, and my scholarly interest lies in, as introduced by Ghassan, the evolving mechanism of Sino-foreign information exchanges and the societal impacts during the late imperial China through the perspective of printing and publishing business. So that's my PhD dissertation explored the history of North China Herald, the most important and influential English language newspaper in China in the Treaty Port era. I have examined its historical development and key figures and institutional changes, in highlighting the role of English language newspaper as a foundational infrastructure within the Treaty Port system. And building on this research, I expanded my scope of to investigate the evolution of communication and media technologies and the commercial and the legal mechanism that supported them when they transplant to China. And this include analyzing their impact on traditional printing and publishing business, and also on the Sino-British diplomacy. So to achieve this, I conduct a more comprehensive research on a more comprehensive range of different resources, including diplomatic archives and foreign company records and personal documents of the British resident in China. So by integrating newspaper reports with these diverse historical materials, I have uncovered previously overlooked detailed in historical narratives that provide fresh insights in how the late Qing China integrated into the world. Today, I'd like to share a discovery that tells us. Also, I learned this story from the newspaper, and this is a fascinating story. It took place in the 1880s and revolved around the British company. Around the British company's failed attempt to introduce steam navigation technology to the Upper Yangtze River, Changjiang Shangyou. And this case study is a classic in the field of Yangtze River shipping history. And thanks the efforts of previous generations of Chinese scholarship, they have accumulated a wealth of materials, and these resources provide a comprehensive understanding of how the people of the Yangtze region resisted British commercial encroachment. But if you learned about this story from the newspaper, you might hear a familiar narrative of how ancient China failed to receive new technologies and rejecting the new technologies. However, upon close examination of diplomatic archives, a new story unfolds. It's about an obscure British merchant who leveraged the institutional boundary of Sino-British interactions using a defective steamer and a treaty port newspaper to influence diplomacy, caused headaches for British ministers in China, embarrassing the foreign secretary, and revised the treaty clause, and while achieving personal success and fame. So for those unfamiliar with Chinese geography, Chongqing is located strategically at the southwestern China and at the confluence of Jialing River and upper reaches of the Yangtze, serving as a vital inland trade hub and distribution center for imports and exports. During the Qing dynasty, Chongqing played a crucial role in transportation of goods such as salt and opium out of Sichuan, and peace good and cotton into the region. So foreign trade was strictly limited to treaty ports. These ports were open to foreign trade and residents as a result of a series of unequal treaties imposed on China by Western powers, starting with the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842. These treaties allowed foreign powers to establish commercial footholds in China, leading to significant economic and social changes. So imagine yourself as a businessman in Lake Qing and over a century ago, setting off from Shanghai with your goods on a steamer. After about 2 weeks, you would arrive in Yichang. As a foreigner, you would have to trade with your local partner because who will handle the transportation of your goods further to Chongqing for distribution. Yichang was one of the 21 treaty ports and the most upstream one along the Yangtze River. From Yichang to Chongqing, travelers had to transfer to smaller Chinese junk boats as the Yangtze River in Sichuan province was too shallow and rapid for larger vessels. The water level fluctuated with the season, making navigation challenging. In certain sections, junk boats rely on boat trackers to manually pull them through, and particularly in the Yangtze River Three Gorges, 就是三峡那个航段. After navigating these gorges, a boat arrived in Kuizhou Prefecture with the purple circle here. Kuizhou was home to the most significant inland tax station in Qing China. This station collected transit dues and other charges and fees on goods moving in and out, generated substantial tax revenue for provincial governors. And I have described this in detail because the natural environment around the upper Yangtze region, because the traditional shipping business was deeply embedded in this social order and shaped by the environment of the natural settings, and also presented as significant obstacles for the foreign business and technologies. In the late 19th century, the British government aimed to establish a foothold in Western China to create a passage between India and the Yangtze River and engage in the central computation known as the Great Game. This ambition led to a series of exploratory mission in southwestern China, culminating the Malgary affair, 就是马加里事件. The British translator got murdered by the local people in Yunnan. The British capitalized on this situation to include the Chongqing Clause in the subsequent Chifu Convention, which effectively state no steamer, no trade. Goes like, when steamers have succeeded ascending the river so far, further arrangement can be taken into consideration. The British government delayed ratifying the Chifu Convention for nearly a decade due to dissatisfaction with its ambiguous term. Sir Thomas Wade, who signed this treaty with the Qing government, explained in his letter to Foreign Office, clarified that the provisions were meant to restrict Sino-foreign interactions. He noted that despite Chongqing's commercial potential, British trade would not escape the abnormal taxation known as Li Jin, as long as it was essential for Chinese exchequer. And additionally, he argued that it would be unjust to both the Chinese and the British people to establish a consulate and community in such an isolated location. So anyway, the Chifu Convention was ratified in 1885, and a British merchant in China, driven by the ambition to open Chongqing, he took action. So who is this merchant? His name is Archibald John Little, the one on the left side. Archibald Little was a legendary man. He was a British subject of Prussian origin, who came to China in the probably 1850s. When he was in his 20s, he even participated in the suppression of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. In the 1860s, he established his Little and Company in Zhoujiang, in Qiuqiang. In the 1880s, he had already operated a steamer between Hankou and Yichang. So that was natural for him to want to expand his shipping business to the Upper Yangtze and get a foothold in Chongqing. And at that time, the larger navigation companies such as Jardine Matheson's and the China Merchant Navigation Company, 就是怡和洋行和招商局, and the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs followed a wait-and-see strategy. The British Foreign Office wanted to take advantage of this little-known company to open Chongqing at the lowest cost. And also, it's worth mentioning that Archibald's younger brother, Robert, the one on the right side, he was the editor and later the editor-in-chief of Shanghai's most influential English newspaper that I studied in my PhD thesis, the North China Herald. The newspaper also played a crucial role in facilitating this scheme. Archibald Little had made extensive preparations for the steam navigation scheme and proposed many times since 1885 to the many British ministers in Beijing, and they all respond passively. There were many factors, but I want to emphasize that according to the research of Professor Zheng Binbin and Zhang Zhiyun, that after the Opium War, the salary of British consuls and envoys in China were no longer tied to the trade, but rely on the fund by the British Treasury. This shift led them to prioritize maintaining the status quo and avoiding diplomatic conflict. They want to do the minimum to keep their job. And additionally, during the 1880s, the British were preoccupied with securing their interests in Burma from the Qing government. However, by 1887, when Archibald has raised £10,000 capital and established the Upper Yangtze Navigation Company in London to carry on the mission to opening Chongqing by a successful running of steamer, the timing was opportune, and the Foreign Secretary Salisbury instructed Minister in Beijing, Sir John Walsham, to support Archibald's scheme. So to take the run steamer open trade strategy. That's the prospectus of the company. Parts of the steamer were shipped from Glasgow to Shanghai in 1887 and arrived in December. After assembly, the boiler and engine were installed to the steamer, and the steamer was named Guling. Now, Guling was, if you still remember the purple circle, Guling was the ancient name of the Guizhou prefecture, and his aim is quite obvious by naming this steamship. The steamer underwent a public trail trip in January 1888. That's the reports on the trail trip. The English newspaper made this trail trip a grand ceremony for the local British communities. However, the editor, Robert, Archibald's brother, revealed in his letter home to England to his family that this trail trip did not go well. This steamer took much longer than expected to return, and Archibald was anxious about the future of the steam navigation scheme. From a hindsight view, Archibald already knew the defective of the steamer. As early as the beginning of 1888, that Guling could not ascend the rapid in the upper Yangtze River, as he revealed later to his partner in London several months later. And the data I found in 4 independent results show that the actual performance of the SS Guling did not live up to the design. So, excuse me. The first set of data was published before the steamer arrived in Shanghai. It should be the designing standard. Oh. The first set should be the designing standard because it's published before the ship arrived and assembled. And the other 3 set data were collected after the launch, especially the report of the Japanese consul, Minichi Machida. His report was firstly discovered and studied by my friend, Dr. Zhao Zhengchao, in his article published in 2018. This Japanese record was recorded when the steamer arrived at Hankou and was the closest to the actual situation. In short, the steamer was larger than designed, and the draught was lighter. Most importantly, the speed did not meet the design, which should be 14 miles per hour, and there was only 12 to 13. The power of the steamer was much less than needed, as admitted later by Archibald in his letter, or it was not clear if Archibald Little intentionally purchased a defective steamer or intentionally purchased a ready-made steamer, or if errors occurred during the assembly. But nevertheless, the Foreign Office did not know, and the British minister in Beijing did not know, and the Qing government did not know, and the local government did not know. So, what would you do if you were Archibald Little? He was shouldering the British diplomatic mission and the shareholders' investment. If he halted the project, he would have to explain to the shareholder and to the public why the company purchased a defective steamer. If he took the risk of venture alone, he would have to be fully responsible for the failure and the damage to the steamer and the possible conflict between the Chinese and British caused by the navigation scheme. Probably after much deliberations, he planned to escalate the private venture to a political event. Archibald requested the British minister in Beijing, Sir John Walsham, to apply for a permit issued by the Qing government to ensure the safety of the steamer en route. The Qing government certainly would not want to take the hot potato, and on the other hand, he ventured along anyway. In February 1888, Archibald set off on the Guling as scheduled, and the English newspaper North China Herald gave a lot of publicity to the Guling scheme after the steamer departed and put the pressure of facilitating this scheme on the shoulder of British Minister Walsham. That's Walsham's telegram. In 1888, the British Minister Walsham was in a very difficult position. On February 24th, the steamer reached Yichang as scheduled. Yichang was the institutional boundary of the Sino-British exchange, and the Guling threatened to navigate to Chongqing. To avoid diplomatic crisis, Walsham had to telegraph, that's his telegraph, telegraphed the Yichang Council to halt the Guling steamer. It was precisely how Archibald had planned. It was precisely what Archibald wanted, because by stopping the steamer, Walsham became the obstacle of Guling steamer and the target of public criticism. From March to September in 1888, the Guling operated back and forth several times between Yichang and Hankou with goods and make profit while waiting for the permit. In September, the engine was out of order and the steamer had to be sent to Shanghai for repair. That's all reported by the newspaper. During this time, the British minister in Beijing, Walsham, had collected enough information from the consuls and was sure that the Guling could not carry the mission. He hinted several times in his correspondence to the Foreign Office. Still, he failed to persuade London because Archibald's partner in London was one step ahead. Using the report on the North China Herald as evidence to accuse the minister of procrastination. In November, the Foreign Office telegraphed Walsham to push him to continue assisting the steamer in opening up Chongqing by this steam navigation scheme. By this time, the company had thoroughly tied up the private venture to the dignity of British diplomacy. We haven't quite talked about the Qing government. On the Qing side, it was quite a different story. The Zhongli Yamen and the local authorities were also tugging. The Zhongli Yamen was the de facto Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Qing government and was an extension of the Grand Council, Junji Chu, representing the central government. On the premise of maintaining peace between China and Britain, the Qing government hoped to take this opportunity to open up Chongqing as a treaty port and absorb the financial revenue of Sichuan province by establishing an imperial custom at Chongqing. And they were facing political risks and financial risks from the provinces. The Kuizhou officials in Sichuan, Kuizhou, you remember the purple circle, the taxation, reported that the boat trackers put up flyers and openly called on the people to fight against the steamer. Considering the education level of the boat trackers, it was unlikely they initiated this campaign. It was probably the complicity between the traditional shipping business, owner of the traditional shipping business, and the local government. Meanwhile, opposition from the Hubei province was more gentle and mild. The Donghu County in the Yichang prefecture in Yichang implied that the steamer might clash with a junk boat transporting charted salt. jeopardizing the salt administration and endangering the central government's revenue on salt. Salt in China was a state-controlled resource. The production, transportation, and distribution of charted salt on the Yangtze River provided the Qing government with a handsome annual revenue for military use and for Peking officers' salaries. The local authorities wanted neither steamer nor the foreign trade because the Guling scheme was not only a commercial adventure, but a comprehensive challenge to the traditional navigation technique, shipping business, commercial rules, tax revenues, administration, and social orders generated from the natural environment, developed from the natural environment of the Yangtze River, upper Yangtze River. At the end of 1888, the Qing government took one step further. The Zongli Yamen noted the British minister John Walsham that, given the risk of the steamer clashing with native junk boats traveling south, the Qing government would arrange for representatives of local authorities to negotiate with the British at Yichang for a regulation to prevent collision. Now, through this step, the Qing government translated the foreign policy decision-making into a local administrative matters, pushing the two sides to reach a compromise. Therefore, these forces formed a new situation at the negotiation table in Yichang in early 1889. Archibald Little, the director of the company, wanted to sell the defective steamboat without letting the shareholders know the truth. And the British minister, John Walsham in Beijing, knowing the defect of the steamer and wanted to get out of the trouble too, and to avoid the moral stain of fraud. And the Foreign Office and Lord Salisbury, unaware of the defect of the steamer, insisted on opening Chongqing by steam navigation scheme to comply with the treaty provisions. And the local government resolutely resisted the steamer at the behest of the Sichuan governor Liu Bingzhang. But under the table, the secret agenda was what Qing government would trade for the company to give up the plan, and how would Archibald Little let Lord Salisbury and Foreign Office know the truth without alarming the shareholders and the London public. In July 1889, the British minister had a crucial meeting in Beijing at the Zongli Yamen. Sir Robert Hart, Inspector General of the Imperial Customs, played a key role in communicating and clarifying the bottom line of the Qing government for the British. He was authorized to secretly propose to the British minister that the Qing government offered to open Chongqing immediately as long as the British gave up the navigation scheme. But only with the prior consent of British could the Qing government put forward this proposal. That way, the Qing government would purchase the steamer Guling at the price proposed by Archibald Little. With this understanding, Archibald Little went back to England in person to communicate with his London partner. And through the mediatory of Sir Thomas Wade, the former British minister who signed the Chifu Convention, Lord Salisbury finally realized that the steamer lacked the power to ascend the upper Yangtze River, and he no longer opposed the abandoning the scheme. He complained to Walsham in a confidential telegram that present situation make both us and the Chinese government ridiculous, and further instructed that, however is the solution of the matter, the Majesty's government cannot themselves press either upon the Chinese government or upon the company, nor indeed can they properly appear in the transaction. Although the British government wanted to achieve this diplomatic goal of opening Chongqing, they were unwilling to get involved in the merchants' fraud. And on the Chinese side, 总理衙门 through Li Hongzhang persuaded Sichuan governor Liu Bingzhang to abandon the resistance. Li Hongzhang was the de facto Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Qing government. In Li Hongzhang's telegram to Liu Bingzhang, Li Hongzhang stated that he understood the steamer. I was translating the Chinese letters in red. The steamer would harm the native junk boat business and arouse the public anger, while the foreign trade would harm the profit of the local merchant and take away the Lijin tax revenue from Sichuan. But if we let the steamer pass, according to the treaty, we must open the trade. It will harm both. However, if we only open the trade and block the steamer, there would be only one harm. Measuring both harms and taking the lighter one should be a wiser strategy. Li Hongzhang's telegram came up with a plan of no steamer, only trade in exchange for the treaty clause, no steamer, no trade. In his telegram, Li Hongzhang implied that either way, Governor Liu would lose his Lijin tax. Liu Bingzhang was Li Hongzhang's student and disciple, who started his career in Li Hongzhang's Huai army, and he had to respect Li Hongzhang's opinion. It seemed that the question of whether the steamer was capable of traveling up the Yangtze River was never a question to the Qing officials. So this way, the Qing government effectively promoted the opening of Chongqing. With this compromise, the sale of Guling was completed secretly. On the Christmas Eve of 1889, the steamer Guling was purchased by the Chinese Imperial Customs for 18,000 pounds. That's 180% of the company's original capital. And privately, Archibald also tied up his personal properties to the deal and sold for 5,400 pounds. While the diplomats of the two sides communicated a compromise, the North China Herald newspaper, which had been closely following the movement of the Guling scheme, fell into an awkward silence since Archibald returned to England. On January 3rd, 1890, when the steamer had already been sold, the newspaper still insisted that Archibald went back to England to mobilize the Foreign Office to facilitate the navigation scheme. And 4 days later, the newspaper suddenly announced the sale of Guling, but did not mention Archibald's personal properties tied to the deal. In this event, the newspaper entirely served Archibald Little's personal interests. On March 31, in 1890, March 31, the Qing government officially signed the Chongqing Agreement, which is 新定中印烟台条约续增专条 in Chinese, with the British government setting out the terms of no steamer only trade as a formal treaty clause, that Article number 1 and Article number 5. In these clauses, the Qing government reserved the right to run steamer on the upper Yangtze River for the Chinese company, obviously for the Zhaozhangju. The treaty buffered the steam navigation from the upper Yangtze River for 8 more years. And in 1898, after the Sino-Japanese War and the signing of Shimonoseki Treaty, another British steamer successfully navigated from Yichang to Chongqing. And guess who was the owner of this steamer? That's Archibald Little. Through careful planning and close cooperation with media, he preserved his reputation and capital, and finally realized his ambition to be the pioneer of steam navigation in the upper Yangtze River. Oh. Excuse me. Let me adjust this real quick. Okay. Conclusion. There are many perspectives from which to analyze this fascinating case, and it perfectly echoes with observes of John Darwin's study of how chaotic the British Empire could be, and how it was driven largely by a private enterprise. But examining the situation from the perspective of Qing government, it reveals that the expansion of the treaty post system was largely driven by its active promotion. The financial needs of the central government became a significant motivation for this expansion. With the establishment of the treaty port, the implementation of imperial customs and the implementation of the imperial customs, the Qing government effectively, not really effective, but the commutation transit dues, 资口税 collected by the imperial custom replaced the Lijin tax previously imposed by the provincial authorities. As Professor Takeshi Hamashida sensei put it in his work, I saw his name in the audience. The imperial, great honor, imperial custom at the treaty ports served as a medium for reorganizing and strengthening the central government's finances. And for me, the mechanism for exchanging official correspondence played a key role in this case, with much of the reference archives, most of the archives I refer to consisting of a local notes issued by the Daotai to the Yichang Council and from Yichang Council to Walsham. When the Daotai communicated with the council, he followed the Qing style by copying all the instructions from the Zongli Yamen to the prefectural officials in his note to the council. This practice revealed the central government's decision-making to British officials while allowing scholars to understand how local diplomats implemented those directives from the Zongli Yamen. And additionally, the late 19th century advancement of telegraph technology squeezed the discretionary space of ministers. Before the telegram, the ministers have usually have some 30 or to 90 days to make his own decision based on his judgment on the current situation in Beijing. But after the telegraph line after the telegram technology was used in the communication between a foreign office and the Chinese British minister in Beijing. This space has been effectively squeezed because the minister required a faster and more frequent reports to Foreign Office, which may have heightened the confrontation between China and Britain. And finally, there were fundamental differences in business practice between Chinese and the British counterparty. The Upper Yangtze Navigation Company was formed under the British Company Act. It allowed the company to to be a separated entity from the shareholders without the need for a loyal charter or an act of parliament. The transparency and accountability of the company director's operation were crucial to the interests of the public and its shareholder. However, when this system transplanted to China's treaty port, these practices lacked the necessary communication and the media infrastructure. Although in this case, the shareholders' investment was not actually damaged. They made money, but there was fraud in the director's operation. and the Pretty Pole newspaper served the director's personal gain rather than the public good. During the late Qing dynasty, the Chinese shipping business operated under the Covey system, the 赋役制度, also known as labor service system. Owners of the junk boats in the upper Yangtze River, referred to as the 船帮, which was literally translated as gang of boats, paid fees and provided transportation service to support the local government. In return, the prefectural government allowed these business operations to continue and granted them certain judicial privileges to protect their interests. Therefore, when a foreign company competed with local business, they not only harmed the interests of the Chinese merchant, but also threatened the local government's revenue and its day-to-day administration. Although Archibald was not good at writing, that's his handwriting in the archive. His handwriting looks childish and sometimes sound impolite to the British officials, but he knew how to mobilize the political and the media resource sophisticatedly to protect his business interests. And he spoke fluent Chinese. He could even talk about feng shui with local people. And he spoke Chinese and dressed like Chinese. He was a successful representative of British merchants in China, and their career were the counterparty to the Chinese business. If I still have time? Nope. I think that's all for my report. These are the pictures I took last year, driven by the admiration and curiosity for Archibald John Little. I embarked on the same journey he did in 100 years ago, and traveled from Yichang with the slowest steamship to reach Chongqing. And this is a silhouette of the Kui Mountain, where the purple circle where the tax station once stood. And that's the Chaotianmen wharf. And that's outside of Little Company in Chongqing. And that's all. Thanks for listening. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any question if I could.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Li, for this wonderful talk. I think it's a really interesting case, very intricate, has a lot of different parties involved and so on. So do we have any, so we have some time for questions now. So if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A button in Zoom, and I will then read them out, and Dr. Li can reply to you.
I saw
Maybe
many familiar names in the audience. My supervisor, my professors, and my friends, and thank you for taking your time to listen to my report.
maybe I can get us started. So one thing I was wondering about was whether you could talk a bit. I mean, you mentioned the Zhaoshangju, the China Merchants and Steam Navigation Company a bit, but what do we know what their interest was in all of this? Can you talk a bit more about that? Because they would have been interested in opening up the route to Chongqing, I would think, by steam, with their own steamships, basically.
Yes, in this PPT slide, can you still see the PPT slide?
Yes, yes.
There were four data. The last one, Chinese official report, was included in the Zhao Shangju's archive that I found in Nie Baozhang 先生 and Zhu Yinggui 先生, their work of the collective the materials regarding to the Chinese navigation history, yes, navigation history in China. And this report, I don't know where this report was originally from. It looks like a government report handed to the the governor, the provincial governor, and was included in the Zhao Zhangju's archive. So, and also in the Walsham's report to Foreign Office, he mentioned that the Chinese merchant navigation company was also ahead of Little. They took actions to they was interested in navigating the Upper Yangtze, but no one took the first step. And both Zhao Zhangju and the Jardine Matheson's company was using a wait and see strategy to see how this goes. And I didn't really refer to the Zhao Zhangju's archive, but I'm pretty sure Zhao Zhangju was in this because the schooling steamer was after purchased by the Imperial Custom, after purchased by He De, the Guling steamer was transferred to Zhao Zhangju and run as a Zhao Zhangju steamer between Hankou and the other place. So I think that'll be interesting if we look at the Zhao Zhangju's archive for this.
Yeah, no, definitely. Very interesting. So we have a question. So the question comes from So Tiam. And the question is, did Archibald Little, who spoke Chinese and dressed in Chinese clothes, also have a Chinese wife and family?
I didn't know that Emily was Chinese. I thought Emily was Robert's wife. Emily was the editor's wife, Robert. And Archibald's wife was Mrs. Archibald, 就是立德夫人. He was not a Chinese in my she was not. 立德夫人是应该不是中国人，因为立德夫人是 after Archibald Little passed away, he edited many of his manuscript and published into books. 立德夫人叫什么来着？I remember, but I'm pretty sure Mrs. Archibald Little was not a Chinese. She's biography was included in the work by Charles Dodgen, Who's Who in the Far East. That's where I see her. And I believe I came across with a website introducing the couple from one of the museum in Britain. So probably I remember Emily was Robert's wife and Robert's I think second wife. But I could be wrong. I need to check this one more time. Thanks for asking. I should have mentioned it in the. But it's perfectly true. I think that's not Archibald Little who writes the books that was currently under his name. Probably his wife did most of the job, editing and revising the words, because based on his handwriting and the language he used, it's unlikely that he did all the writing.
Interesting. We have another question from Lo Wai, and the question is, thank you for the fascinating talk. You mentioned that the Japanese state was interested in opening up Chongqing as well. Could you please say a bit more about this?
I didn't quite look into the 外部省 archives. My friend Dr. Zhao Zhengchao did a fascinating study according to the Japanese Foreign Ministry. 赵正超博士，现在中国那个社科院，他就是根据那个日本外务省对于固林号事件的这个观察，写了一篇文章，就是这个新定烟台条约。然后在这个在他的文章里面呢，基本上大量的材料是外务省的对于这个事件的观察，所以当时日本应该是非常密切的情况，and also in Walsham's correspondent he reported to foreign office that if we are to allow the steamer to take on this scheme, can we please consider Jardine Matheson's Jolly Matheson company's proposal because they proposed first before Little, and the Foreign Office responded that no, you should just facilitate this adventure. And so also in the report of the local Yichang Council's report to Welsham, he recorded there are Japanese companies focusing on this scheme. And probably we should look at more of the Waiwusheng archives to know more about the Japanese side of the opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be interesting, I think. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I mean, one thing that I'm sort of interested in is what happens to Archibald Little after what you talked about, because I think it's kind of interesting that he seems to a lot of things seems to go wrong for him, but he seems to come out okay from everything. He gets like his money back because the cooling is purchased and then at a very good price, and then he seems to, as you showed, seems to just continue with a new venture up to Chongqing. So could you talk a bit more about, and also because you showed this old in Chongqing, the old house of the little company. So could you talk a bit more about what happens after this episode to Archibald Little and his steamer venture?
That's very good question. 就是Archibald Little 他在固定号失败之后，他实际上 Archibald Little was actually a very wealthy merchant because from his actions he could easily easily win back England. That's something that not a regular British merchant in China could do back in the late Qing dynasty. He could easily travel back to England, and to cover his handwriting, he used typewriters in the later letters to communicate with Welsham, which was unusual because the typewriters in the 1888 was not quite normal to use in the government communication. And after he established his little company in 1896 in Chongqing, the little 洋行，立德洋行。他接下来 I will try to explain this in Chinese first. 他接下来实际上是获得了当地商人和清政府的信任，然后被清政府委托呢，大概是在1904年的时候去参与四川的矿业的开采，矿业的这个兴办，所以说他是一个相当不寻常的商人，因为他实际上在中国获得的成功，很大程度上是因为他更像一个中国商人。When I visited this old site of the little, they renovated this old site and make it a little museum inside. And when I visited this little building, and opposite to if you see the yellow building here, that's the 八省会馆. There was also a exhibition in the 八省会馆 showing the late Qing business practice of the Chinese merchant. Li De was actually quite friend with local merchant. He 经常的宴请这些八省的商人，跟他们的关系好像还不错的样子。所以说他的语言的能力应该是一个 advantage of him for his speaking Chinese, and he was quite a legendary figure. 他曾经还参与过太平天国那个镇压太平天国运动，在这个南京，所以他的人生平是非常不平凡的。
Where did he learn his Chinese?
I don't know. He came to Canton in the 1850s in the 长城洋行, the Persian company. I don't know his English name. Sesson Company. Chanchen Yanghang, worked for the Chanchen Yanghang for the tea business and opened his own business in Jiujiang. I think he might have befriended with Thomas Wade because after he failed to mobilize the support from the British minister in Beijing, he jumped to the Foreign Office to push the Beijing ministers to support his scheme. He asked Thomas Wade to write a letter for him to the Foreign Office. And at the end of this story, he also asked Thomas Wade to reveal the truth of the Guling to Lord Salisbury. So he probably was a very close relationship with Thomas Wade.
Okay, understood. That's interesting. We're almost out of time, but we have one more question from one of our graduate students, Hua. And she says, hello, Dr. Zigui, Dr. Li, actually. Thank you for your fascinating talk. I was particularly intrigued when you mentioned that one of the actors in your story discussed feng shui with people. I'm curious about the relationship between feng shui and the Upper Yangtze steam navigation scheme. Why did feng shui attract such attention in this context?
Actually in the government communication between Walsham and the Salisbury and the Foreign Office, feng shui seems not to be a question that took serious. But on the newspaper North China Herald, they use feng shui opinion, the feng shui 观念 to mock the Chinese people for their backwards and 迷信, superstitious. And but in this case, I think that's quite interesting because the name of the steamship was 值得回味 because the first steamship that failed his attempt, named Guling. The Guling should be the mountain, name of a mountain that was firmly stand between Yichang and Chongqing. And the second steamer that successfully traveled between Yichang and Chongqing was Li Chuan. It literally translated as flow with the river, or benefit the Sichuan province. So the second steamer's name appears to have better meaning than the first one. So that's some feng shui, I think, in this case. And in his early exploration on the Yangtze River on the Chinese boat in 1883, he write down the journal. He to record the daily stuff happened on road. And he mentioned in some certain place. Archibald talked to local people, and local people will consult to him about the feng shui advice, why their tomb or their houses and their 子侄的那些科举考试的 in the imperial examinations. He probably know enough to talk with local people on feng shui, but the feng shui never seemed to be a serious problem in the government level, more like an excuse for the local resistance.
That's similar to what Elizabeth Curl has written about in terms of railways, actually.
Yes, that's exactly.
That's quite interesting. Okay, so we are unfortunately already out of time. So what remains for me to do, Dr. Lee, is to thank you very much for taking the time to introduce this new research to us. I think it's very interesting, and I think we're looking forward to seeing it published somewhere because I think this is a fascinating case. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. Yeah, and thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please email me if you have any questions. My email was on the PPT. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.